We made this.
Welcome to the Starlight Ballroom. Hey!
Hello and welcome to Shipwrecks and Comatose, the podcast about Red Dwarf here on the We Made This podcast network. We are back for Series 8 of Red Dwarf. We're actually looking at some Red Dwarf rather than random shit. And my name is Mark Adams and I am your host for today. And with me at this time is my co-host, Kurt North. Hello, Kurt.
Hello, we are back. I am back. I have not travelled in time. I've just stayed in an infinite stasis until you arrived.
And that's why you've got a massive beard and massive claw fingernails.
I'm not quite sure what's going on there. I don't even know my name.
No.
And guess what? It's Series 8. It's recording of Red Dwarf. And guess what?
Are you unwell, Kurt?
Ill. Isn't that a surprise?
But it's not just you and me. We are joined for the next 3 episodes by Carl Bryan. Hello, Carl.
Hello, Mark. Hello, Kurt.
Hello.
Everybody good?
I'm good, Carl Dagger. Hope you're well.
I'm very good. I am very, very good. I folded up the yellow cord jacket for the start of Series 8 and just put it back in the cupboard for now.
That jacket. I'm glad you enjoyed the Crime Traveller episodes, Kurt, and I'm glad that people listened to the Crime Traveller episodes because it was a bit of an indulgence because we just wanted to do it. So I'm glad that people have enjoyed it.
Well, it was lovely because I've been doing a bit of extra travelling of late. My car journeys have increased quite substantially, so I haven't watched a single episode. But I've enjoyed listening to you talk about something that I don't know what I'm talking about. It was just like some sort of hypnotic tape revision or something that I was just driving, and when I got to my destination, I felt, yeah, I've enjoyed being with friends. I have no idea what they were talking about, but I've enjoyed it.
I wonder whether that's the case for a lot of people. I do wonder how often people watch the specials stuff like Crime Traveller or whatever, and I don't care as long as people listen. And for some reason, the Crime Traveller episodes have been really popular.
Yeah, I told a few people that I've been doing the episodes, and they're like, "Isn't that?" And the thing where they sort of like go, "That thing, it was on, it had," and there's always something completely wrong. I think they got mixed up with bugs at one point, which is something we mentioned in the old podcast there. But yeah, it was really good fun. It was certainly better than The Prince Among Men.
Yeah, it was. But yes, we are back for Series 8 of Red Dwarf. We are on the air for 8 weeks in a row, covering each single episode episodically. I think that made sense. And because it's an 8-episode series, and because the first 3 episodes are all called Back in the Red, we've got Carl for the next 3 episodes. Then we've got Colin for 2 in the middle, and then we've got Matt for 3 at the end. And we just broke it up that way. But it does mean that today, this is the first of 3 recordings in one evening. So if we're tired by Back in the Red episode 3, please forgive us.
I'm tired now.
Yeah, you'll have to forgive me because I've been at work all day and I've never been in back-to-back meetings where every single one of my 8-9 hour shift has been me talking for 3/4 of it. And now I've coming on to this and we're going to record about 4 hours. So in average, I would have talked more than half of the actual 24-hour period.
Good. Well done.
I needed to raise money for that. I think I might be in training for a 24-hour kind of production or something.
Podathon.
Yeah, some sort of podathon. I get how Tony feels now when he did his 24-hour thing. That must have been hell.
Oh, I forgot he'd done that. Yeah, that's our. Well, Matt's very rude about him, but he's actually a relatively moderate boss most of the time. That's the guy who runs We Made This, for people who don't know. He's also been on this podcast talking about British Empire.
Yes, and moderate is not something I would normally associate with Tony.
Oh, no, I mean moderate as opposed to tyrannical rather than moderate as opposed to furiously socialist.
We love it.
Anyway, we've got a lot to do, so should we get on with the first episode?
Let's do it.
Of Series 8 of Red Dwarf. Series 8, Episode 1, Back in the Red, Part 1. It was written by Doug Naylor and directed by Ed Bye, and it was first broadcast on the 18th of February, 1999. Gentlemen, how old were you and what were you doing in 1999?
Well, that was 9 days after my 19th birthday. Oh, I can tell you exactly what I was doing. At the 28th of January, 1999, I started my proper full-on first-time job that lasted for 7 years. So I was just starting a new job.
Brilliant. And did you watch it at the time? Were you still into Red Dwarf?
I think yes. I think it was definitely probably one of the seasons I probably watched the most, ironically. And I think I've said over the years now, we actually can talk years.
Yeah,
over the years of
3
talking
years.
about Red Dwarf, that I've been looking forward to getting to Series 8 because it is one of my favourites and I think it is underrated. So, yeah, absolutely love this season. And I've seen it multiple times. And even we've had a couple of delays in recording this, but I've probably watched this between 7 and 8, which I'd say is another 6-month gap that we've had potentially because it was around June, July we recorded. And now we're recording in February, so almost half a year. I've probably watched this 6 times, this whole season 6 times in that space of time. So, yeah, I watched this at the time and on multiple occasions as well.
Brilliant. And Carl, what about you? How old were you? What were you doing in 1999?
I was 17 and I would have just been wrapping up secondary school and just about to move on to college, which was a thing that not many people around our way did. There was a very specific, you went to school, you finished, and then you went and did sixth form for 2 years, and then you went off to university. And because I didn't particularly enjoy school, I literally went to college on a whim of somebody going, oh, I'm going to go do film and media. And I was like, well, that sounds fun. And within about a week, I was like, well, I'm going to go do that then. And so this would have been me. I think when this came out, I would have just been like getting ready to go. So I was in that sort of limbo period between school and college. So I probably was paying a lot of attention to this because I had a lot of free time on my hands.
I was in my second year of university, and I vividly remember in my second year of university that we happened to have the unfortunate luck of being on the wrong side of the student digs we were living in for television. And what I mean by that is it was a student block that was exclusive for second year students. On one side of the building, let's say 1 to 3 on each floor, they got great telereception. Terrestrial telereception, remember, it's still 1999.
Yeah.
On the other side of the building, we got no telereception. So I was exclusively watching VHSs at this point and playing video games. So I didn't watch this live. I caught it when it was released on video. I was, getting very, very drunk and vaguely doing some university work as well. And yeah, I didn't watch it originally. I've watched it a fair few times since. And up until we started rewatching it, I had some fond memories of the episodes with the dinosaur in, but we'll talk about that another time. But I completely disagree with you, Kurt. I think this is probably one of the worst series of Red Dwarf. I think it's grossly overrated compared to Series 7, which was much, much better than this. And it's going to be interesting how you and I are going to maybe butt heads a little bit on this. But I wonder whether it's because, like I say, I didn't really watch it at the time.
Yeah, there could be that. There could be a bit of nostalgia in there, I suppose, yeah, because, 19 years old, as I say, when I was watching this, I would have still been in that zeitgeist. And yeah, it's interesting. I know we've talked a little bit off air about certain things, and I do obviously take on board a lot of what we'll probably get into, and I also do think as well though that the humor's different. I think there's a decided difference in humor compared to a lot of the other things, and there is stuff behind the scenes as well, which when you know about it, it's kind of like I can see where they were going and what they were doing. But for me, Series 8, it kind of takes what Series 7 did and then swings the other way. So, and this goes to what I was saying about Doug Naylor in general, that from Series 7 onwards, the whole show just swings backwards and forwards constantly, and you will find this in the Dave era. There is still swinging going on. There's still this thing of like you're not quite sure where it's ending. Red Dwarf 10 is brilliant, and well, as far as I concerned, Red Dwarf 10 is brilliant. But even like Red Dwarf 11 and 12 are kind of like, oh, hang on, and there's moments where it's like he's not picking. He never seems to pick a lane, which I just find really fascinating, especially with Promised Land as well, because Promised Land is a different beast altogether as well. So there's a lot of things to look at in the way Doug Naylor deals with stuff over the coming period that we're talking about.
Oh yeah, and don't get me wrong, I'm looking forward to discovering once we finish this series. There's only Back to Earth that I've actually watched, and I've never watched anything since. And so it's going to be a fascinating dynamic once we've done Back to Earth. And we've all joked how much we are worried about Back to Earth, but I'm kind of looking forward to maybe giving it a second chance, because I only watched that once, whereas at least this I got on VHS and did watch a few times.
This for me, I was when you said obviously you had a bit of a pause there from Red Dwarf because you were out doing the uni studenty thing of everything.
No telly.
And with no telly, I mean, this is just on the cusp of digital, isn't it? That was what, 99, 2000?
Yeah.
It's probably because I still can't get an aerial telly reception now. So digital TV is one of the greatest things ever for me. But Red Dwarf 7 for me, watching it back now, I still enjoy it, but it knocked what I liked about Red Dwarf, because I enjoyed the studio audience that set up that atmosphere. And this for me took that back and brought that back, and also took some of the bits from 7 that I did like, which was the technological sort of advancements, the special effects advancements, things like that, and also with the big seismic shift of what we're going to talk about in terms of how many more people are in the cast and the situations and things like that.
Yeah,
it did really kind of revitalize it for me. And I never actually bought these ones on video. I didn't get these in my home until the DVD, which would have been many years later. And then, like I said, since then I have watched it multiple times since. So it was quite nice to have that gap from being a 17-year-old to someone who was in his mid to late 20s at the time, and then got to watch it. And when we were talking about how there are things that Mark isn't particularly looking forward to in this series because of things.
I mean, let's be honest. Rape gags.
Well, I mean, when you first initially said it, I was like, I can't remember any prison rape gags in there, but I probably just wasn't thinking about it at the time. So it's going to be quite interesting, having it been a few years since I last watched it, seeing it now and then going, oh, that isn't it? So it's interesting for me, because it's going to be a series I haven't watched in a good couple of years, but revitalized my enjoyment of Red Dwarf. And it's going to be interesting seeing it now to see see if it holds up, really.
Yeah, can I just touch upon a couple of things you said there? The talking about the studio audience coming back. What's interesting in Jane Killick's book is that she talks about the how Doug was saying that, we had obviously Red Dwarf 7 and the audience were back, and it was really interesting with having the laughter go on. There's things that in this, and I know we'll talk about it in the next episode with The Salute, that was longer than anticipated because he was playing to the audience a lot more. But what I found fascinating, a couple of comments, and it was like, it's interesting this, because he talks about how it goes back to a single camera and the fact of the extra shoots and the lighting that he can't do and all that kind of thing. So he's had his cake and he ate it in 7 because he wanted to put up, that filmic quality as such. And he can't do that here, but the balance is that you've got the audience. So it's fascinating how that, as I say, going back to that swing thing, and that it seems that they wanted to do that. And there's also the Chris Barry kind of saw the writings on the wall a little bit, I think, with the whole, actually, I watched back in 7 and I really enjoyed the bit with the crocodile, and I really enjoyed those little moments. And he was like thinking about his time in Korea, and he's looked back at the episodes and things like that. And I thought that was really, really interesting that, a number of things have started to come back and almost feel like, actually we want to go back to the whole idea of having an audience there and not doing those moments. But it does feel that Doug's kind of makes a little provisional comment saying the hours were grueling because you're doing a one camera shoot, not the dual camera or the dual blocking setup shit you can do in an audience where there's nobody there. So I did find that fascinating within the book.
Even though it is recorded, it is more of a live performance, isn't it, with the audience there? The biggest example of this is Chloe Annette. In Seven, she did struggle. You can tell she struggled because she didn't know, without that audience there, she almost didn't know how to, for lack of a better term, she didn't know how to be dwarfy. She didn't get in the flow of dwarf, as it were, because there was no audience there. And in this one, she looks so much more comfortable because she knows she's getting that immediate feedback and she knows kind of where it's coming in. Also, if I'm right on this one, I believe the writing team is whittled down quite a bit, if not just Naylor on his own. I can't remember, but I think there is quite a few writers. There's more writers on Seven than there are on this one. And I think that's kind of helped with keeping the rhythm of Red Dwarf going in this one, in that Doug Naylor knows it better than anybody else apart from probably the cast. Yeah.
There's only Paul Alexander that writes other than Doug.
Yeah.
There's only the two of them.
I never remembered Series 6, the continuity was Bobbins. Like, oh my goodness, we've fallen upon this thing. We've gone round on ourselves and found the simulant ship, which makes no sense because we were chasing after Red Dwarf in one direction. There was a lot of bobbins going on in Series 6 that I never remembered because I idolized it. Whereas one thing I will say about this series is that this really does feel like they had an arc, a very much an arc where you did benefit properly from watching every single episode in order and coming back every week. And there was a little bit from everything that would continue on to the next episode. I mean, we've got the first ever 3-parter.
Yeah.
And another 2-parter. They've only ever really done badly resolved They've only ever really done badly resolved cliffhangers in the past. So it was quite ambitious in that. And I like that and I respect that.
Was it ambitious though? They had less money, or was quoted as having less money than Victoria Wood's Dinner Ladies.
Really?
Yeah. And they kind of, like, the original idea was back in the Red was going to be a 1-hour episode. One of the comments that I made, I know we're jumping maybe a little bit ahead into the actual thing, but this is just a macro view. Things like the Crichton scene where he's with the chair tied down, and there's another scene which I can't quite remember right now, feels like a sketch show because there were things that were added in to expand the episode just to make it 3 episodes. Right. So they actually went back and filmed stuff just to boost it, just to give it a little bit more depth. So talking about the Rimmer Salute, even though he did it and it was an audience thing, they actually kept it in because it ate up an extra 30 seconds or so of screen time, because the original plan was for it to be 30 minutes, but they extended it because they didn't have the money. They wanted to get to that 52 episode mark, and the only way they could do that was actually, well, we haven't got the money, we haven't got this, we haven't got that. What is the compromise? The compromise is the cat in the when they're doing that
the dancing.
But yeah, no, well, the dancing is, I think that was already in the heartbeats.
Okay.
So they feel like sketch show. They feel like just a little, they're like a subsection of the story, aren't they? Because they don't do anything to the show. They're just there to expand on time.
But surely that's okay. This is a comedy show. It's a sitcom. It's not supposed to be a tight TV drama.
Yeah, but those scenes were put in because it needed to be in the extra time. So they had rebuilt that into it.
Yeah, I didn't know that until you just mentioned it. And thinking about it, you can't tell. Unless you know that information, you can't tell, because it does work. Because I get from watching it again for this episode, I would almost think, especially in terms of the cat, if those scenes weren't in, he'd barely be there until he escapes. There wouldn't be a cat going to prison what are they going to do with it? Because Crichton, obviously, it's a big part of the episode, but with Cat, it's sort of he's going to prison and then he's not in prison anymore. So having the salsa beat, heartbeat, I think works pretty well because it gives that thing of this is what's happening to him while everybody else is being arrested.
It's that thing of the constraints make you do things that you wouldn't expect.
Yeah.
And that happens so much in television, and sometimes and often it actually comes out better than you would expect. And that's that for me, because we'll talk about it when we get there, but I have my own opinions on that Crichton scene in the seating bit. So so I do think that sometimes that having constraints on you and having the cost constraints, or things that you weren't expecting happen, like loss of characters or loss of actors for a week or something like that, that actually makes the thing better because you're thinking on your feet, and sometimes the third thing that comes to your head actually becomes the better thing anyway.
Right, so it is a new series. And what do we do at the start of a new series? We talk about the new credits. Have you prepared, Kurt? No. No, you haven't, have you?
No. I do remember this one more, though.
Right. Well, what I think I'm going to do is I'm actually going to
There's an explosion at the very beginning. The very first is the explosion at the beginning. Yeah, I do know that you see... Let me go for this. Cat with something underneath his clothes. Right. You see a very kind of rampant Chloe Annette. You do see something to be... what's going on there?
Did I put you at your misery? Do you want me to just go through?
Dinosaur foot.
There is a dinosaur foot. Okay, so you've got many explosions. You were right. There is Rimmer back without an H, so he's no longer a hologram.
It's not a baby H. Sorry, that's an Alan Partridge joke.
Oh, dear. There's a dinosaur foot. You were right, and there is indeed a very horny Kachansky. There's an alien, maybe in Cat, a lot like when the alien pops out of the chest in the film Alien. There's a dancing blue midget, some claymation, a completely nude Rimmer and Lister, and then it ends with the number 8 done in prison chalk. Now, take yourselves back to the first time you watched this. For you two, it was 1999. For me, it may not have been. It might have been 2000, 2001. What in the world is going on here?
The dinosaur was the thing for me. And you missed a bit there in that you do see a shot of the dinosaur at the end before the credits. But I almost think watching it back now, if they'd left that shot out and just had the foot, that would have been more intriguing. But I think it's because it's so fast, and maybe subconsciously you don't want to spoil it for yourself by thinking about it too hard. It never really made me go, oh, this, oh, that. I think the dinosaur. I didn't even twig about the claymation thing. I don't know why. It was just that. Oh, cool. That's there, but I'm not going to think about it too much.
So I've been thinking about this, right?
Yeah.
Do they do this kind of clippy stuff for series 9, 10, 11, etc.?
Yes, we've had this discussion. You're going to do specials on it.
Brilliant. Good.
We're going to go. I am going to host them because I don't do many specials, and we're going to do mini-sodes on what does Mark think.
Brilliant.
Is this before he's watched the actual shows as well?
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah.
We get the Red Dwarf music. And it's lovely to hear that. It's an iconic soundtrack, and that's how the episode starts. And Lister is in prison. And Lister and Rimmer, without an H, are in prison. And Lister is reading a gossip mag, but Rimmer is doing his very best to ignore him. He's pissed off, but we don't know why. Lister bets him that he can make him talk, and then tells him he stole some money from beer. That doesn't work. He then says he dated Yvonne Magruder, and when they had sex, he got carpet burns on his arse. And Rimmer loses it. He just shouts and gets very cross. And then Lister apologizes, and we find out that he poured a whole tube of it over him. So we don't really find out very much. As an opener, did you feel that this was an attempt to be like a bunk scene?
Oh, it is a bunk scene.
Yeah.
It is a bunk scene.
Yeah. It's you can almost say that some of this it's almost like a reboot in a way. because we're going back to the studio audience. We're going back to the bunk scenes, although in a different scenario. And also that thing of they can't escape is now back. But literally they can't escape because they're in prison. I really enjoyed the fact that obviously now Chris Barry's back after half a season off, and it's building to him saying something since he's back. And when he does break, it's a very Rimmer-esque outburst. And I think if you were in the audience, I can imagine it would be fantastic, because it's just like, go on, say something. What's he going to call him? He's going to call him something. Is it a goit? And then, he just explodes. And it's nice because you're immediately like, oh, we're back to the comfortable dynamic of them being together again and really not getting on.
Yeah, and I think we'll go into this quite deeply because I know it's something that Kurt's really interested in. It's not Rimmer that became Ace. It's like a throwback to series 1 and 2 Rimmer, really, at least to begin with. And I think this really does quite a good job of establishing that.
Yeah, it does. And so to go to your point about the bunk scene, you have the remastered Red Dwarf to thank for that. Because they were remastering the series and then they kind of went, do you know what? That was what was really great about Red Dwarf. We need to work out how we can get them back into that kind of mode. And that then became the bunk scene. I think that's really fascinating that, the remasters as we have some opinions on that. But then it actually does help with this episode. And like you say, with the whole the Rimmer thing, is that they've expressly said, the fact that he is like he used to be. Lister even says that, doesn't he? So he kind of goes, "Oh, it's you I used to be," and actually makes it that point, and up the ziggurat lickety spit and stuff like that gets mentioned. I will say this opening, I absolutely howl with laughter in this opening. An 83-year-old dad, the way his eyes go. Just the way he goes, really hurt me. They never heal carpet burns, do they?
It's great. It is
hilarious. My favorite
hilarious
line of this whole bit, and you can tell Craig Charles is loving delivering this line, is both cheeks, man.
Nearly wore them to the bone.
Yeah. he's so bad. I mean, this is after, because if you see any smeg ups from this series, this is after he's got out of prison. In the outside world,
because he uses his dreads as like saying, "Oh, it's like being back in jail." Yeah. That's what he does.
Chris Barry says to him, "Prison's changed you, But you can just tell Craig Charles is so happy to be there with Chris Barry, doing arguably what he does best, which is be Lister. And I think this is the series where all of the tension between Chris Barry and Craig Charles just dissipates, and they're just getting on. And that must have been, after all these years, so nice for them to get on and be funny together, because they're getting older and you don't want to hold these grudges over what you did when you were, 21 or 22 or whatever it was. But it's just nice for to watch it as well. It's nice to see them back in this situation.
What a time for God. Honest to God, I can't honestly tell you how long I've been waiting to talk about this scene.
The joke that I really liked was brand new tea bag, because that's a joke prior to this, actually, way prior to this, that my family always cracked about my Auntie Judy, who made a bloody awful cup of tea. Honestly, she made a crap brew. And we used to joke that, she'd put the tea bags on the washing line after she'd used them. And so that one really resonated with me. And we were cracking it before it was cracked in Red Dwarf.
And I think what I like about talking about that swing as well, that the laughter that you feel, and especially the way that Chris Barry's face goes, and he's kind of like scrunching up his face and stuff like that, and he says, and he's gets really excited at the end. You can feel the audience You can feel that.
Yeah.
It's a live performance, you know, and it's just brilliant. It's just absolutely amazing. I just love it.
3 days earlier, Starbug enters Red Dwarf, but Red Dwarf is gigantic. Lister's body has been restored to normal from the super hench Lister that he had been at the end of the last series. Red Dwarf is shrinking, and it's something to do with the nanos. Unfortunately, their tiny Starbug gets sucked into a vent. Holly comes up on screen and wants to play charades. Their odds of survival are bad, and they're very likely going to get crushed. Kachansky finds an alternative route that could work and save them, and so they go for it. And I just want to say about this scene, holy shit, Norman Lovett is on form. Clearly, he's in a very similar situation to Craig Charles. He's clearly having a lovely time doing something that he didn't know whether or not he'd be able to do again. And the other joke that I think is worth highlighting is Brown Alert.
Yes.
It's a poo gag.
It in this, I think now, say with Danny John Jules and the cat, sometimes he gets some random gags to do, and you know, sometimes they're about clothes and stuff. But I think this kind of shows in this series, he's actually got his delivery's got better in a way, in that it seems more natural to come from the cat. Some of these jokes now, and I think it's just a great joke. Yeah. It almost doesn't need the "don't say I didn't warn you" bit, but it's just a really good gag. And
the Nostromo,
is
just
and he looks
just
so.
Like, he's putting his face back.
He looks so proud as well when he makes the joke. It's I mean, I get the feeling that they may have thought that this was going to be the last one.
And yeah, that's probably true.
And I mean, in a way, it was for many years. So just like, look, let's all come back. Let's, we've got this idea. It's a really good idea. And then let's do this. And then if it's the last one, we've had this really good series.
Well, you won't have heard this yet, but this was discussed by Craig Charles and Danny John Jules on the PBS specials that would have aired by this point. And they were convinced that this was the last series and they were going to be doing TV movies.
Right.
Okay. Why does that not surprise me? That's just totally a Doug Naylor thing to do. And they
didn't do a TV movie until 2018.
Yeah.
Was it 2018 or 2019?
It's 2019.
No, but Back to Earth is technically a TV movie.
That's what I mean. That was 2019.
I thought 2018.
No, that's not
Promised.
2008, 2009, wasn't it?
That was episodes. That was 3 shit episodes.
I think if The Promised Land hadn't come out, they would be on Doug Naylor's gravestone when he passed away. But the film.
I suppose the Back to Earth, the director edition, is recorded as one, isn't it?
There is no subtle way to say this. Starbug ends up in a giant rat's arsehole. And yeah, that's a gag that happened. I mean, I laughed a lot, and I'm not proud of myself. It's a pretty crude gag.
I can imagine the cast, when they read that in rehearsal, somebody went, "We are back, baby."
I was really wondering which way we were going to go there, because I love that gag.
I love that gag too. It's fucking funny.
I hope we don't get stopped by the cops. They don't like it when you're rat-arsed. Especially because at that time I was getting heavily rat-arsed every single week.
Yeah.
So Friday afternoons, 2 p.m, straight into the pub across the road from work, and wouldn't return home till probably 2 a.m. So it's totally in my wheelhouse at that point, and I still love that gag. And what I particularly love about the gag, and I know this goes against every will in my being, is that it's CGI, and it's amazing, brilliant CGI, because it is so bad that it's great, and it's designed to be that way, and I like it because of that reason.
I like As again, yeah, with the CGI, they're like, oh, it's same as the crocodile in Series 7. It's like, it doesn't have to look fantastic because it's the jokes are the more important part. Having said that, one of my favorite bits in that CGI is when they first go into the rat's eyes widen before it takes off.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Magnificent.
And then when they're in it, it just kind of like all goes red and they're all looking up.
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
Yes. So they eventually throw the rat off as they expand. And then after many crashes, Starbug is completely and utterly smashed into tiny pieces. And there is a very, very scary landing and no one gets injured.
Yeah.
Well, there's a very scary landing. And Chloe Arnett, who looks amazing, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm just going to put that right out here. Looks incredible, right? And I held my tongue a little bit with Chloe Arnett in Series 7. But Series 8, wow.
Yeah.
Just wow. She stands the entire time.
And doesn't get injured.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Starbug rolls and does everything, and she's just standing there in like a crucifix stanchion between two chairs, and it's fine.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe we shouldn't be splitting hairs about that after being pleased about a spaceship going into a rat's bottom. But yeah, that did stick out to me. And anyway, yeah, they run away from the wreckage and it explodes. It's one of our many explosions.
I mean, of course, don't get me wrong with the Chloe Annette thing as well, that the fact her hair's grown in the space of like 20 seconds in real time, but that's obviously a production issue and I'm quite happy with it. It's fine. It's one of those things. But what I wanted to ask a question on is like, the way they've done it, it looks like Series 7, which I find fascinating. They actually have that look going into it because they didn't have to do this, did they? I know that obviously the way it ended, they could have done it a different way, but it's just interesting how they kind of give you the premise of the Series 7 thing moving into the Series 8 thing. I think that's quite interesting.
Yeah.
I like as well, and I didn't realize this until like the second or third time I watched it, is they're dismantling, for me, metaphorically, Series 6 and 7 piece by piece. So they lose the engines, then they lose the midship and the kitchen, which I thought it was odd that they mentioned the kitchen until I realized that's where we spent basically the last two series. And now that's gone. And then eventually the head of the Starbug explodes once they're out of it. I was like, oh, there's no going back now. So if this Red Dwarf turns out to be something's wrong with it, tough, basically, or we're getting a new ship.
Yeah.
I do like you say, Chloe Annette does look amazing. Even when she's lying on the ground after the crash, she still manages to look absolutely resplendent. And like I say, she stood up all the way through it. The cat who sat down all the way through it looks like hell.
Bad air.
Yeah. I like the fact he's Saki to Crichton, though. Where he's like, you don't look, oh my God, you look terrible. He's like, you don't look so good yourself. he's not like, oh no, none of my clothes will fit or anything like this. He's just out and out sarcastic.
They are greeted, and I do love these cameos. They're greeted by Selby and Chen. The Nanos have resurrected them, and indeed the entire crew. Unfortunately, Peterson couldn't make it as he was drunk.
And too expensive.
And in Harry Potter. And
that is me, by the way, just so you're aware that whenever I have a massive drinking session, I go hard and play hard, but the following day I'm missing. So whenever you say, where is he? He's probably still drunk at home in bed, just going, absolutely hammered.
No, that's fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm Peterson in this situation.
Shame you haven't got the actor's money.
No, that's true.
All that Harry Potter merch, all that blood money from that turfy bitch. Oh, no, moving on. Captain Hollister appears, and he's with a new character, Thornton, who reads them their rights.
Mac McDonald, the undercover MVP of this series.
Oh, he's great. He is great in this series. You're absolutely right.
I think they must have said to themselves, look, we're going to bring the crew back. We probably definitely can't bring back Mark Williams, but, we could probably get these two back. But I can imagine they've gone, we need Mac back for the whole thing.
He's the antagonist at the end of the day, isn't he, for the show, for the series, really?
Yeah.
which is interesting that they do play with that.
We need him back because he when he was in the first series and occasionally turned up in the second series, he was probably the most major character out of all of the old crew to be there. And he's a very funny actor in himself. So yeah, it's so good to see him back. Definitely.
Lister is marched to his quarters by Thornton and put in handcuffs. Holly comes on screen and the crew don't know about him yet. They decide to keep him a secret. Lister asks him what happens if they're convicted. And the unfortunate news is that they'll get 2 years in the brig, which was classified, which is why they didn't know about it. There's actually a population of 4,000 in the brig, and every person there is scary.
So one big thing you haven't mentioned there. Where are we?
Yeah, that's not my notes.
Carl, where are we?
Oh, we're on Red Dwarf.
We're on Red Dwarf, but where specifically?
Oh, we're back in the quarters.
We're back in the quarters.
Yeah.
The original quarters.
Yeah.
Oh, is it the original quarters? I didn't even spot that.
Yeah, it's Lister's quarters. I mean, obviously it's been rebuilt, but it's Lister's quarters, which for me I find fascinating because you get the beginning scene with them in the bunks in the prison, and then you've got the little nod to, like, again, what Carl was saying. This is what it used to be, and this is what the original show used to be. And I thought that was interesting because it's playing with your emotions a little bit with it. It's like, oh, they're back, because you think, oh, he's back in his quarters, and then in the next couple of scenes, which I know we'll talk about in a second, Rimmer appears. So it's playing on that nostalgicness, which I think is fascinating. But yeah, the having the original quarters was a good shout for me.
Yeah, I didn't actually realise that it is built to look like. I just thought it was quarters. I failed to realise it was the original, right down to them how grey they are.
How grey they are. The screen, the Queeg screen, effectively, because it's the same screen. The goldfish bowl, all of that's kind of all there.
The window that's probably still a bit of cardboard with lights being shown through holes. But I do like this because I think with a lot of this, as you said before, some of the continuity was absolute bobbins. And I think knowing now that you've said to me that the plan was to go into TV movies, I think part of the thing for this series was, let's get the continuity straightened out here.
Maybe.
Yeah, let's get this sorted. So getting them back on the ship, and as well with things that we hear the crew say, just jumping forward a little bit, some of the crew realize that they are 3 million years into the future and they're in deep space and they don't know how they got there. And so it's not just we're going back to how it was. There is that twist on it of we aren't, but they don't know why they're there either. So there could almost be a spin-off series just of the crew trying to figure out what's happened.
Like Lower Decks.
Yeah.
Although I suppose Lister and Rimmer are already Lower Decks, really, when you think about it.
And the fact that the way they're getting around, how they can make this ship look the same but different, is it's been restored to its original design plan before they had any cutbacks. And I think that's quite good because now you've wiped the slate clean, but you've wiped the slate clean with something familiar. So you've now got an open world to play with, but it's something that the audience are going to recognise. And
now I know that Kurt said that their budget had been cut. Could this have actually been a dig as well? That they wanted something a bit more grand, but they had to cut it back?
I think that was probably more in Doug Naylor's head. I don't think they needed anything more grand. But I think Doug Naylor probably would have wanted to go Series 7 and more. But they didn't. And I think it's worked out better for it because the quality of episodes, I think, is up from 7, in my opinion, in terms of the stories, definitely.
So this scene does have my very first gripe. As a tattooed and pierced person, I thought the gag was cheap, that to emphasize that someone isn't a very nice person, you just put the vision of someone who's tattooed and pierced on there. And I'm like, really? Is that how you're going to define what a bad person looks like. That's
But I didn't take it that.
No, I
Completely
didn't
disagree with
either,
that.
yeah.
Completely disagree with that.
why.
I took it as that is what the perceived notion of somebody would be, and the fact that he's saying my name's Nigel, I'm nice, is to play on that.
The fact his name's Nigel as well. It's a very soft name, I think, and Holly backs it up by saying Nigel's lovely, unless you put him near a magnet, which would be true. I'd be annoyed if I had all those piercings and you put me near a magnet.
I just thought it was cheap, and the suggestion is that people who get tattoos and piercings are likely to be in prison. I thought that was cheap.
No,
I didn't take that whatsoever.
No, I didn't either. I know he was on a mission. The actual actor was on a mission to become Britain's most pierced and tattooed man.
They were legitimate piercings. Yeah, it wasn't makeup.
Yeah, if it was somebody who had like both eyebrows and a nose ring and one tattoo, and they were saying that, I'd have said yes, it would have been a cheap gag. The fact that they went to the extreme and got the man who's trying to be the most pierced and tattooed man in the country, if not the world, works because, it's sort of like if you went to prison and, you saw that guy, you would go, I'm avoid that guy. But if he's like, hello, I'm Nigel, I'm lovely, then you're like, oh, okay. So for me, I don't think it's a particularly cheap thing at all. I think it works quite well. And we never see Nigel do anything particularly evil or nasty.
Did we see Nigel again?
Nope.
No, I don't think we did.
No, he just comes on, big smile, kind eyes as well, I thought. Really kind eyes. So no, I agree with Kurt. I don't think it's a knock at all. And I'm someone who's also quite heavily tattooed, and I didn't think that at all.
Maybe I'm being oversensitive then. I think there is an element of this series is so problematic to me, even more so than any of the stuff from the 80s, that maybe I'm potentially a little bit more guarded than I've ever been.
We'll see how we go when we go through.
We'll see how we go. Well, next scene, there's 2 gay rape gags. The typical prison gay rape gag in the very next scene. So maybe I then made the notes about the Pierce guy. But yeah, Rimmer enters, cracks some gags, and it's the old Rimmer. Lister tells Rimmer what happened in Series 1 to Series 7, basically, in a paragraph. And then the nanos, they are revealed to be missing, and they need them to corroborate their story. Otherwise, they sound completely and utterly batshit. But yeah, this scene, gay rape gags, prison, you get a prison, you get bums, blah, 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 awful. I guess for me, it's just not very pleasant seeing jokes about how people assumed that all gay men are rapists. And I don't like it. It's thoroughly unpleasant. It's cheap. It's not funny. And I don't think it was funny at the time. And I think it was cheap at the time as well.
Yeah, no, don't get me wrong. I agree. I'm just trying to remember what the actual thing was said, because I can't remember what was said.
I didn't write it down because I found it that unpleasant, I'll be honest.
He says Lister's bemoaning all the things he's going to go without, like no lager, no curries. And then he says 2 years without sex. And Rimmer walks in behind him and says, you hope.
I remember that one.
I don't remember the other one, though.
Anyway, no, it doesn't matter. It's fine. The criticism is valid. I'm not denying that, and I do agree on that one, on that particular point, Mark. I'm not saying that it wasn't right at the time, and it shouldn't be right now. So I do agree on that.
Yeah,
definitely.
I must admit at the time I didn't actually. This is going to sound horrible. I didn't equate prison sex to gay sex. I don't know why I never made that. But,
I think when was Tango and Cash?
89. I think.
So I think my natural inkling would be the Tango and Cash scenes that would fall with. So I probably did equate them.
Yeah, I probably stared too much at
Tango and Cash.
Kurt Russell's arse is fantastic.
Good to know.
You don't want to get foo-barred.
I've heard the term foo-barred.
Yeah.
I think that's probably why I kind of knew it at that point, because my mum was a massive Kurt Russell fan, and I'm not called Kurt because of that. Just so you're aware, I'm not called Kurt because of Kurt Russell.
Could have been Russell North.
Is that your middle name, Kurt Russell North?
Kurt Russell North.
Kurt Russell North. It is now. Kurt Russell dagger.
I mean, it could have gone the other way. You could have been Stallone North.
Sly North.
Yeah.
So Crichton and Kochanski are in the next scene, and Kochanski's very upset about the nanos. There's a fun gag about the nanos doing good until they met Kochanski, and I just love that the dynamic of Crichton and Kochanski is reinforced here, and it's very funny, bitchy. Chloe Annette deserved this scene. She's brilliant.
Yeah, I like this because it's a natural progression for those two. And I know we'll get this later in these episodes, but it's moved on from the jealous Crichton to actually there's a bit of camaraderie between them, and there's less to and fro. And I think the two of them together work really effectively. Yeah. And the way that Crichton's like kind of like with his notepad and just and this is where you met me, and it was like okay, but it goes to Carl's point as well, I suppose, as well, because it's going through that continuity again. It's kind of going, you met me through the conversational, the rip and the dimensional rip and stuff like that. So it definitely does feel, I mean, Red Dwarf, the more I think about it, the more we've gone through the series as a whole, the amount of soft reboots we get almost every season, or at least every other season, is really interesting. And this one is, as you say, laying it out, just here's the continuity. This is what we're going to do. And I
like as well how they tied it into some major events in previous series, like the nanobots caused things inadvertently. Like the big one I noticed was Legion. Said if it wasn't for the nanobots, we'd never met Legion, and Rimmer would never have been Hardlight, which I quite like. Although it doesn't really make a difference because he's not there, as far as they are aware. He's not there. He's off being Ace somewhere, which is kind of a nice thing for the time being for them, is that they don't realize it hasn't occurred to them that Rimmer's been resurrected. As far as they're aware, their Rimmer, our Rimmer, is off in a fantastic wig, doing Rimmering somewhere.
There's a bloke on Grindr who does.
Yeah, I realised what I said after I said it. Yeah.
Anyway. The next scene starts with an insanely misogynistic shot of the sexy doctor's legs. What the actual fuck?
The male gaze.
Just why? Just why?
I've just got that up in front of me. Actually, I didn't think of that.
I've got it on my YouTube.
Just what that was completely unnecessary. Just ick.
I genuinely didn't think of it in a maybe it's because I'm not that sexy, but I just genuinely didn't think of it in a sexy way.
I mean, I didn't think of it in a sexy way. It's a girl, but I spotted that it was vile.
It feels to me that he's trying to still produce those filmic directional things.
Oh, the shoes tapping and
Yeah, it feels like he's trying to do something and it's not coming off very well.
It achieves nothing other than there's a nice pair of ladies' legs on the screen. There's no relevance to the plot. There's no relevance to the character. It is just 5 or 6 seconds of let's pervert this woman's legs.
And what I will say is, quickly moving on from that, is the sheer overacting of Mac McDonald is glorious.
Oh yeah, so she's the doctor character, which I think maybe the legs thing was to undermine her because she's a woman doctor. Fuck knows. Did I point out I don't like Series 8?
Yes.
So and she's waiting outside the toilet to talk to Hollister.
I'm going to be exhausted by the end of this, Anna.
Yeah. And she asks about the rumour of Red Dwarf shape and location, which is something you briefly talked about before, Kurt. It was supposed to be classified, but she was told by a coffee machine. Holly is down, and Red Dwarf is identical to the original design before the cuts, like you mentioned before. And so we discussed that. Let's go on to the next scene.
The thing about this scene for me is, yes, there is the shot of the legs, but it went that quickly. It was just a shot of some legs.
Really? I thought it prolonged.
I didn't think it was a prolonged
one.
I mean, I've around this time Millennium was airing, and to be fair, Millennium did this on purpose because it's a serial killer. So they actually did the whole male gaze.
Which is great and clever and intelligent. This is not.
That was really slowly panned. This wasn't slowly panned. I'm not defending it. But that's understandable.
The thing that I'd take away from that bit more is it goes from, a woman's legs to probably something sexier, which is Mac McDonald coming out of a toilet spraying deodorant in the air. I mean,
They're in the mid-bay and she's analysing the cat. He has 6 nipples, colour-coordinated internal organs, and a samba beat heartbeat. Hollister asks for the heartbeat on tape after doing a really fabulous little dance. I enjoyed Hollister's dance immensely. I also enjoyed that they put it on a CD.
Yeah.
Part of me was like, this is not in time to anything. Was I not the only person who thought that?
Ding, 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 ding,
I mean,
ding,
I've got
ding, ding.
minimal
We've got to
rhythm.
repeat it. You've got to go that dung, 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 dung,
Yeah.
ding, 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 ding.
I mean,
Ding, ding,
I've got
ding,
minimal
ding,
rhythm, but I was a bit like, this has got no rhythm to it.
It definitely had rhythm. It was great. I tell you what it reminded me of. When you used to have a Yamaha keyboard.
Oh, yes.
And you could have the backing track so you could play it along. It reminded me of one of those.
Yeah.
And I used to just play those because I didn't have a CD player.
Yeah.
You know, it would age much more better if it was on vinyl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, you know, they're back, baby.
And I like the fact that Cat has that much control of his body that he can change his heartbeat and the inside colour of his organs.
Yep. Brilliant.
Pretty easy and pleasing bad.
Yeah.
It makes sense, though, because cats are much more kind of supple and body manipulative-y than people, right?
Yeah. It's the nipples thing I thought was quite funny. Was it easier to please in bed, especially if you can play the piano.
And what I do, and just a little tangent with the dancing, is that, you know, 25 years I played in a band, in a corporate function band, and, you know, watched many a person up to time dance, and we used to find it absolutely fascinating. It was like, how are you doing that? You know, we used to try and recreate it. It's almost impossible to recreate an out-of-time dancer. It's ridiculous, and it was great. I loved it. I loved watching them.
It's the Les Dennis thing, isn't it? You need to be a good pianist to be able to be a bad pianist that's funny. Not Les Dennis, Les Dawson.
Les Dawson,
Mark.
Yeah. Well, Craig Charles said it, didn't he? It's like he can play, but actually playing badly is quite tricky because it goes against everything your muscle memory wants to do. Yeah, it's an odd one.
Rimmer and Lister are outside the captain's office, and Lister begs for his help. He bribes him with information that will help him to become an officer. Rimmer was reticent because of Lister's old behaviour, but he's ultimately fallible, and Lister has seen a lot of classified files. Rimmer asks him to prove it by actually helping him to get promoted first. Lister gives him the watch that has Holly on it and tells him where the files are on Starbug. And they're in their old uniforms.
They are. The thing that always jumps out at me, and it shouldn't, because it's just a little thing, that Craig Charles really struggles to say resurrected.
Yes.
He goes, before they grew resurrected. I'm thinking to myself, they must have been tight on time there because they haven't had time to either they've had a couple of cuts of it, it hasn't worked, or whatever, or that was the best cut they had. Because it just seems a bit odd that you wouldn't redo that. But stuff like the Winderline and the Schwarzenegger too was just, you know, and it was great. Brilliant. And I think just seeing them two together in that mode, like we've seen all right the way through this episode, I think is a testament to just how good that they're bouncing off each other, like we said before, with how they seem to be really at home with themselves now.
It's a fun, but it's almost a new twist on an old dynamic in that they raise it in this thing where they tell a story about Rimmer passed out naked on his bunk, so Lister drew on his genitals. Oh no, sorry, took a picture and then drew a mustache and glasses. Lister's laughing at it like, oh yeah, I remember that. That was years ago. And Rimmer said that was last week. So that's an interesting turn on it. Is now there's this. It reminds me a bit of Back to the Future 2, where old Biff goes back and witnesses something happening to himself, and he's like, "Oh, I remember that." It's odd, but it works. It's that interesting dynamic of Rimmer thinks Lister is the person he was at the very beginning, which is admittedly much more immature than the one we have in Series 7. But Lister's got to try and prove to him that he's a mature adult now, or maturer.
I think it does a good job, actually, where it kind of does emphasize that there is also like a different dynamic and acknowledges how the character has matured and how the character has evolved throughout the last 6 or 7, 8 series of Red Dwarf. And he even emphasizes that it's been 6 years out of stasis, which is really interesting because, I mean, let's compare, let's say, 1999 me to 2005 me. You know, I was at university in 99 and 2005. No, I was quite similar to what I was like at university. So 2005 to 2010, I was a completely different person. So I think it does
just choose
a
your
good
years,
job
Mark.
Yeah.
You kicked your own arse there, didn't you?
I did. But what I'm getting at is it does a good job of establishing what the difference is, what the dynamic is, yet still manages to make it funny. So it's not just pure exposition. They've really thought about it and made it full of gags.
And what I like is you're seeing everything through Lister's eyes as well. You're like, oh yeah, he has changed. He is this, he is that. And the rumor we're seeing is not a rumor we've never seen before. And it adds that juxtaposition between the two of like, you're on board with Lister because we've seen Lister. This is a new character in Rimmer. But you're kind of having that, and I'd say the uniforms going back to that kind of series 1, series 2 aesthetic, you know, and just having them that wide apart, I think works. And I just love the way that my natural inkling is to listen when he says, yeah, years ago for you, you know, it's not, for me, it was years ago. And it's like, yeah, he's been through so much, and you naturally attach yourself to that. And you have all of that wealth and knowledge behind you when he's talking. You can understand where Lister's been.
Yeah.
I do like that. There's a very quick gag in this that I absolutely love, which is knowledge is power. Who said that? I don't know. No, do I. I feel that was Chris and Craig just going, I've got this gag and I want to do it. And just the little details as well. Even the fact that even in the set design and the uniforms and things like that, they have gone back to basics.
Yeah. And don't forget Lister's tie, which is like the size of, 3 inches or something?
Yeah. It's like
It was like what the cool kids did at school.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even though they've gone back to basics, it still looks like, I've got the shot in front of me here. It's got the shadows of things on it. It's not just them leaning against a grey wall. It's what we had in season 1, but shot slightly differently with lighting and things like that. So it is dull, but it's a more interesting dull.
It's adding depth, isn't it? With like the shadows in the wall and on them and stuff. Yeah.
Next scene is Dr. Lucas McLaren, the ship's chief psychiatric officer, in a conversation with Crichton. Another thing that you mentioned earlier, Kurt, that you said was basically filler. Crichton gets himself into trouble by telling the full and accurate truth, but then saying that he can lie. He tells him about when he was made and about the nanos, what type of robot he is, and how Lister has helped him to break his programming. He's currently working on ambivalence. Unfortunately, after all that, McLaren recommends a restoration to factory settings.
Here goes the very moment I learnt what ambivalence meant, and it is my quotable dwarf of the week. Because whenever I get a chance to say ambivalence, I do it, and it's because of this scene. And what I'll say, like talking about the filler, even though, yes, it looks like a sketch show, it plays out in next week's episode. There's a thing that actually continues on, which I like. How did you think to the scene, Carl? And I'll come back to it.
I enjoyed it. And again, I didn't think it was a filler. I think it worked quite well because without this, it would have felt very abrupt that they jumped straight to reset his factory settings. Obviously, there's the scene we see earlier on where he's trying to say no to people, but I think this really helped sort of put that almost sense of dread in. The thing was, the guy who plays the Doctor in this, I thought for the longest time was doing an impression of the Chris Barrie impression he does of the ship's psychiatrist back in whatever episode it is in season 2, where he's going through all the things, because they're speaking in a very similar voice. And then I remembered that this guy's name is McLaren, and in that episode, the guy's name's Brannigan. But I enjoyed this scene. The actor who plays him is one of those actors who turns up on a lot of shows. So I recognized him from something pretty much straight away. I do like the gag about, like, keep checking that chair for me.
Way deep into the ground.
Yeah.
You see, I thought that particular gag was where Kurt was coming from on it's long, it's elongated to fill space. And I didn't like the chair bolted to the floor.
It probably went one too many times.
I love that type of humour, though.
Yeah.
So I absolutely love this scene. And yeah, you're right, it's not really filler, because at the end of the day, what we're saying with them looking to elongate scenes, it might have been that the scenes have been elongated, but you still need to have... There has been rewrites to get it into the scenes themselves. Like the cat one is definitely more filler than this one, because this one has a playoff later on, which is intriguing, because obviously, like you said, with the cat thing, that without those scenes, it doesn't really do much.
The thing is with the cat, there's not a lot they can do to him that would fit the tone of the show, because the only thing I could think of that feasibly, that if this was, say, something else like, I don't know, Star Trek or Andromeda, is they could put him down, and you're not going to do that in Red Dwarf. It's a bit too serious, even if you write that they rescue him from being put down. So just having him in the medibay basically is kind of all you can do that I can think of off the top of my head. Otherwise, it gets a bit too dark.
Yeah.
He can't be reset to factory settings. He can't be... the only thing I could think of is you could put him in... No, even that's too dark. You could put him in solitary confinement, because he's essentially an alien, where he goes feral.
They could have gone much darker with it. They could have done kind of dissection stuff and things, which would have been a classic sci-fi thing.
Zoo.
And I think this was a classic... Yeah, exactly. But I think this is also a classic sci-fi thing of, the non-organic sentience and whether or not it has the same value.
Yeah.
And then a threat to that sentience. Yep. Whereas they went for the classic sci-fi here. They didn't with the alien being tortured and dissected and overly experimented on. Yeah. And so it's an interesting one that they didn't go down that route for the cat.
They were more fascinated with his nipples, as we all would be.
I mean, 6. Just a lot of nips.
I've got a question about this, and I think probably Series 8 as a whole, because this is... the character is ramped up to 11, because that's what he is. He's overplaying it, and it's very funny. I know it's not particularly your sense of humor, Mark, which I appreciate, but you have a lot more of this type of humor throughout Series 8. So I'm thinking of the smashing of the groin. I'm thinking various things like that's happening. It's like, it's more slapstick than Red Dwarf has been slapstick. There has been slapstick moments, but there's definitely more gag-based slapstick stuff or overexertion of characters and things like that, which I think is a warranted criticism of it, even though I particularly like some of it. Now, we will probably get into certain aspects of it, but I think this is the first real telltale sign that there is this overblown characterization of certain things. Like I was saying about even like Mac McDonald doing that double take, which is over-exaggerated. There's this feeling that things are just starting to be over-exaggerated to make it more of a comedy using the body or using the character. And I think that's been pushed a lot more than we have seen in previous seasons. I'm not saying it hasn't been there, but there's definitely more of a push to that ilk. And I'm wondering myself, is that a cultural thing as we hit into the late 90s, going into the 2000s, and it's trying to keep up with culture, or what is it trying to portray, really, is what I'm kind of questioning. And do you think that's maybe a good criticism for people not to like Series 8 or to like Series 8, depending on how you look at it?
I found it really interesting, actually. I thought it was more of a callback. I thought it was much more of a classic sitcom, heavy on the gags, heavy on the slapstick, going back to stuff like Fawlty Towers. And I thought that was a deliberate choice to make it a proper old school classic sitcom rather than taking things forward to the early thousands.
Yeah, I'm just looking here to see what other sort of things came out in 98. And we're looking at stuff like, say, Men Behaving Badly was still on. Vicar of Dibley was there. Knowing Me, Knowing You.
That's 2 Alan Partridge quotes in one episode. I'm liking this.
Yeah, so, we've got, but there was still stuff like Smith and Jones was on. Big Train was on at the time. Birds of a Feather. All this kind. So there was still quite a bit of more traditional sitcoms And then the more of the alternative stuff coming out, like things like the Adam and Joe show and Operation Good Guys. Do you remember that one? It was like a mockumentary thing about the police. So it is like it's in a transitional period between, you've got your more experimental sitcoms and then the straightforward, there was still things like As Time Goes By on with Dame Judi Dench on it, which was a good show. I still maintain that was a very good show.
Yeah, it was good. I enjoyed it, yeah.
But I think it's where that they are changing with the times. I think it's very, very good how they did this. They are changing with the times while still maintaining a good chunk of what made Red Dwarf Red Dwarf. You know what I mean? If 8 and then 7 were in a different order, it might have worked a bit better, kind of, because people may have been more ready for a more drama-based, expanded, like scope-wise, visually Red Dwarf in the 2000s. They would have been in 1990. What was it, 7 that it came out?
Rimmer is in the Starbug cockpit and finds the files plus vials of the luck and sexual magnetism viruses from the episode Quarantine. Rimmer swigs the sexual magnetism, and Holly isn't impressed.
So I didn't get this gag. I kind of still don't get this gag. I do like the sick bags on standby and Norman Lovett's reaction to it. But when he says bottoms up, then bottoms down, and hopefully bottoms up again, I was like, that's not how you do sex.
But is he talking about it? I took it that he was bottoms up as he's drinking.
Yeah.
That he's drinking the drink, then he's going to have the sex. Like bottoms up, drink.
Yeah, but it's when he says bottoms up, bottoms down, and then bottoms up again.
You're both overthinking this. What he's doing is he's having sex. So his bottom goes up, and then it goes into the lady, so it goes down, and then it goes up again, it comes out of the lady, and then it goes...
No, it's down in the drink.
He's talking about his stroke.
Bottoms up is down the drink.
But that's the pun. That's the pun. He's talking about his bottom moving up and down because he's going to have sex. It's not a complicated gag.
I've never heard straight sex described so matter-of-factly than when you do it. It goes up and then it goes into the lady.
I don't want to talk about straight sex, but it's a really obvious fucking gag. Why haven't you got it?
I haven't had sex in a while, Mark. I don't mind. Yeah.
I haven't had sex today.
I don't think it's a particularly funny gag, personally.
No,
it's not, but it just confused me.
And I don't understand why. It's a really simple gag.
Because I think it's because
how your bum goes up and down when you're putting your cock in it. Ugh.
But it's like, yeah, it doesn't matter. Okay.
Anyway, he walks down the corridor. The virus is working, and he's delighted. End of the episode. Fucking hell. Anticlimax.
This does lead to my bit of requotable dwarf, which is the world loves a bastard. I do like that line. It's full nostrils flared, smug Barry looking quality of a line. I do like it. It's interesting, the sexual magnetism virus, because it seems to work on Rimmer much longer than it does for anybody else.
He must have he's got a heavy dose of it, hasn't he? Because he's bottoms up, you see.
Yeah, he's down. He's basically Jaeger bombed it.
Yeah.
And I think
rapey though, isn't it?
What's that?
Really fucking rapey.
It is, and I think it's the only character where you can get some mileage out of it, if you know what I mean. It's slightly, I don't want to say acceptable, but Rimmer's the only one where you could probably get one laugh out of it.
He takes a potion that he knows will change how people perceive him to the point where he can take advantage of them being attracted to him. That's really fucking rapey. And you wonder why I don't like this fucking episode and indeed this entire series, because it's full of shit like this.
It does backfire on him.
Good. Anyway, I think for me, the absolute highlights of this episode are Captain Hollister. He is a revelation. He is a brilliant addition to the cast. It's great to have Holly back properly and on form, and I feel like Chloe Annett is shining as Kachansky, and there is a huge amount to like in this episode. There's some really good ideas. It's really ambitious. It's really funny. It throws 100 gags at you, yet still manages to put in a little bit of interesting sci-fi. There's a lot to like about this, but shit a brick. There's also a lot that makes me want to just pull my eyes out with a fucking spoon.
I'm not at the eye spoon level yet, Mark. It has to be said. I don't know how you feel, Kurt.
I'm nowhere near the eye spoon level.
Yeah.
Oh, right, I was exaggerating, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Sometimes I do rewatches. I won't be rewatching Series 8, and I will be rewatching Series 7, which I didn't think would be the case, actually. Any other things that you two wanted to say about the episode as a whole, as we go to what's a bit of a disappointing cliffhanger?
The thing is, with the cliffhanger, I get the feeling that they had it in mind that eventually it would get released on home media where you could watch it all as one. Because it's very apparent, especially with the second episode that we're going to talk about, the ends of the episodes are very much like a, oh, okay, kind of end to them. And I think they kind of had that. It's like Kurt said earlier, this is originally supposed to be an hour-long episode. And I almost get the feeling that they'd started work on it before they found out it wasn't going to be an hour-long episode. And so they just went, where's a good point to do this where we could feasibly put dun, 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 into, and Rimmer about to go out and be the most sexual being in the world is probably the best place to stop at this point. Yeah, it's odd because the first two definitely do just end. And that's quite odd.
I don't think I need to say any more. I'm going to talk more about some of the stuff that you've said that I've deliberately held back because I've got some opinions on certain things that we'll talk about next week or the week after. So I've got nothing else to add at the moment.
So briefly before we sign off, I did watch the commentary and there's a few interesting tidbits from that. The commentary was an insane number of people. Mac McDonald, Robert Llewellyn, Chris Barry, Chloe Anna, Norman Lovett, Danny John Jules, but no Craig Charles. And they all agreed that they were happier with the audience being around. They felt that it suited Red Dwarf better. And going back to what we were talking about, they suggest a TV movie would have been better for this and that they would like to do one in future, which is what they discussed on Smegheads in Seattle. Yeah. So, they are keeping consistent with all the contemporary stuff here. I think they definitely thought they were going to get a fucking film. Lovett talks about how much it had changed in the period where he was away. And Danny John Jules said that the rat was originally going to be Frankenstein.
Oh.
No, that's maybe...
They were going to end up Frankenstein's arse. For those of you that aren't massively, stupidly nerdy, Frankenstein is the cat that got Lister put in stasis in Series 1. I think I'd have enjoyed the gag less if it wasn't a rat, because rats are vermin and cats are beloved house pets.
And you wouldn't get cat arse.
I realised that you shouldn't be doing that.
No, you wouldn't get cat arse.
No.
Also, that would probably have led to people going up to them at cons for years going, yeah, but if they did this to Frankenstein, that means cat wouldn't exist, which is bollocks because of the wibbly-wobbly resurrection-y side of things. But I can imagine they would have had to explain it a million times over the following 20-odd years or whatever it would have been. But yeah, maybe a rat. I mean, the vermin thing, I know a couple of people who are going to be quite upset about that because they kept rats as pets.
My Charlie Rat. Charlie Rat was great.
Yeah, but it wasn't a pet rat, was it? It was a rat.
Yeah, it was a rat.
Whereas Frankenstein was someone's beloved pet, whereas that was just a rat.
At least it wasn't a rat race.
All right.
And Starbug 1 and 2.
Thing, Wow.
Sorry.
And the final thing, which is something I thought you would find interesting, Kurt, is that the psychologist scene, considering how many smeg-ups you've seen with Robert Llewellyn fluffing his lines, they only needed one take and they did it from start to finish.
All right.
So there you go.
That's ultimate performers there.
What if they're almost annoyed when that happens? It's like, oh, if I finish early, I won't get paid as much.
Yeah, I say that.
Robert Llewellyn probably wanted to be out of the mask, so he'd have been very pleased with himself.
Yeah.
So that's the first episode of Series 8 in the bag. Carl, where can people find you on the internet?
People can find me online at allmylinks.com/Mr. Carl. with what I'm up to at the moment.
Kurt, what about yourself?
If we're doing that, then Linktree, linktr.ee/RMuldrake, RMULDRAKE.
Yeah, that's why I got on all my links, because I knew I would not be able to do a link tree on one of these.
I kind of need to get one of those, but I haven't.
You've been saying that for about 18 months.
You're only on 3 podcasts, Mark. It's fine.
I'm on 2. So, yeah, the only other one I'm doing that's active at the moment is Chucky Vision, which is about the Child's Play and Chucky franchise. So if you like horror and you like me talking shit, at Chucky Vision on Twitter. So thank you very much for joining us for another episode of Shipwrecked and Comatose. And until next time.
Sick bags on standby.
Welcome to the third age of podcasting.
The year is 2023.
The name of the podcast
Is a dream given form.
Join us for the 30th anniversary of Babylon 5 as we move to fortnightly episodes looking back at The Gathering, the pilot episode of Babylon 5, Season 1 and beyond, with a plethora of guests to join us too.
The Gathering is actually 1 week where we critique. There's some good stuff in there, but we can absolutely critique too, I think.
I completely agree, definitely. I liken The Gathering and the first episode. I kind of compare them to the X-Files pilot and Deep Throat. I wouldn't say hate, but it's a very, very strong dislike of the cycle.
Yeah, well, I feel like the cycle ruined one of his childhood. So,
yeah,
you know,
essentially.
And also, as well, there were levels. There's Talia representing the psycho that destroyed her mother, and then there's Bester and Bester and Kelsey, you know, who are just psychopaths, and you know they are the personification of everything that she hates.
And be sure to check out all our content from the last year of A Dream Given Form, including thematic lookbacks at the show.
And today we're going to be discussing the 3 prominent leaders of Babylon 5. Sinclair, Sheridan and Delenn.
We thought we would combine our 2 greatest loves, because it's not just Babylon 5, it's Lord of the Rings too, because there's a lot of Lord of the Rings influences that JMS drew upon developing Babylon 5, and even interviews with some of the stars of Babylon 5 itself.
He said, I'll tell you what. He said, what would you like to do if you had a character? I said, first of all, I don't want to carry a ray gun. I don't want to carry a blaster or a transporter thing. Beam me up, Scotty. I want to be different than everybody you have on here. And I want to carry a sword because that is what he lives by. That's part of his thing, his warrior mentality.
I love hearing that people are still interested in Babylon 5. And, you know, it's really an honor to continue the conversation around a show that meant so much to us. And, you know, it's the little show that could.
So check out A Dream Given Form, a Babylon 5 podcast on the We Made This network.
The last
best hope
for peace.
Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast, was created and produced by Mark Adams and Kurt North. You can find us on Twitter at Red Dwarf Pod, and we are part of the We Made This podcast network.